The Wall Street Journal has an eye-opening report this morning on potentially secret conversations that may have been taking place between Elon Musk and Vladimir Putin. Among other items, the paper reporting that Putin asked Musk to avoid activating his Starlink satellite internet service over Taiwan as a favor to Chinese leader Xi Jinping. For more on this and so much more on the election, Silicon Valley, and the economy, Joe Lonsdale is here at the table, Palantir co-founder, of course, 8VC founding partner, and someone who never really holds back. So, and a longtime friend of Elon Musk. So let me ask what you make of this report.
Yeah. So what's going on, Andrew, is you got to look at the background right now. Europe is panicking. The Harris camp is panicking. There's 2 weeks to the election, and they are throwing stuff at the wall. And what's happened in the last couple of weeks? What's happened is there's amazing momentum against the Harris team, right? So you have tell them not to go into Israel. They killed the bad guys in Israel. They looked really, really dumb telling them to stay out of Rafah when they got Sinwar, right? You got the Tabatatai, who worked for Mali, who they brought in, clearly seems to be leaking stuff. Her father worked for the Iranian regime. Europe right now, of course, really angry at Musk. They had to fire Thierry Breton, the commissioner, who used to be a minister in the French government. People in the French government do not like Elon right now. Right? He just shamed them. Just 2 days ago, it came out they're trying to kill Twitter. So basically, they have all this momentum against them, and they're panicking and they're throwing stuff at the wall. And the last time we talked about Russia this close to an election, it was the intelligence community working on a fake document that Hillary created. They spent 3 years investigating him for BS. So it's like you have this context that you have to look at.
This report highlights the tense backdrop of international politics just weeks before a major election. Alleged pressure from Europe on Musk and rumors of hidden agendas stir up serious questions about geopolitical alliances and influence. It feels like we're watching a high-stakes chess game between global leaders, with Musk caught at the center. Could these leaks be a tactic to sway public opinion? Or are we seeing real insight into the power dynamics shaping tech and politics?
I want to hear what you're saying, so go ahead.
Yep.
Yes, are you finished?
No, I was going to say, but what do you think the validity of the report is? Meaning, do you believe that he is talking to Putin? And if he is, do you think that's appropriate?
So I have no idea if he's talking to Putin or not. I think the main thing, as far as I could tell, is they accused him of not giving something to Taiwan. You can look up very briefly, the Taiwanese government has not given permission for Starlink to operate in Taiwan. Elon works for the national security state. Lots of his companies do. He has, I have companies that do as well. You have to follow the rules when you work for the national security state. I find it highly unlikely he's breaking the very clear rules you're given when you do that. So I think it's probably very silly.
This raises an interesting question about Musk's role in global affairs and his obligations within national security frameworks. Given the sensitive nature of his contracts, it's hard to imagine him crossing any clear boundaries, especially with Taiwan involved. But it does make you wonder, is this just election-driven noise, or could it hint at deeper tensions around tech giants and state influence?
And the rules are, if you are talking to a foreign government, particularly a hostile foreign leader, you have to report it, right? That's what Eamon was telling us earlier. We're trying to figure it out.
There's all sorts of rules that I'd be shocked if you broke them. But I mean, the accusation, as far as I could tell, is turn off Taiwan. Of course he wouldn't turn off Taiwan.
No. We saw it was a joint venture that the country requires. We kind of talked about that earlier. The country requires, and that's why he's not there.
My understanding is that you're not allowed to do diplomacy on behalf of the United States, and I'm confident he's not doing
I think
that.
part of the question is, so if you got a phone call, because you have security clearance too, for certain things, I imagine. If you happen to get a phone call from Putin, just on your phone when you leave the broadcast today, whether you have to report that call to the government or not.
If you talk about anything relevant to national security, you definitely would have to. You definitely would have to, just tell them what's going on with that. But again, I think this is really important. There's so much momentum on the Trump side in foreign policy the last couple of weeks. It's just almost comical how bad it's gone for them. So you're going to see them throw more stuff at the wall, and you have, I think deep state's kind of a silly term, but it's kind of a real term because you have bureaucrats who are basically do not want to obey him. These guys attacking Trump right now are people who try to go around him, and they're going after him. So they're going to try a lot of this stuff.
The conversation here touches on a real tension in how tech leaders like Musk engage globally. If there are security clearances or regulations around foreign contact, it would be surprising if anyone crossed those lines lightly. But it's clear that these accusations are surfacing at a moment of high political tension. The question of influence, from deep state to bureaucrats, isn't new, but it's becoming a focal point as we approach the election. Are these genuine concerns or just part of the noise?
Elon could knock this down pretty quickly by just saying, hey, I haven't broken any national security requirements or anything along those lines. We had Ackman on this week, and he said part of the reason that you are suspect of what happened with earlier issues with that last presidential debate was because they haven't come out and denied some of these things. It'd be pretty easy for him to just say this is not true.
I'm sure he will if he finds it necessary. At the same time, I think people are trying to create distractions to go and skin the
Let me ask you a question. As someone who spends a lot of time thinking about defense, and you are 100% right that this administration has been very outspoken about trying to tamp down things and prevent or at least seemingly appear to prevent Israel from escalating things. And clearly, I would argue the things that Israel has done in the recent weeks have been a great success. And so the appearance on the other end of looking like you were not in favor of that looks like a loss. Having said that, there are people, and maybe you're going to say this is a deep state view, but a deep state view that while they have said certain things publicly, and maybe you can argue this is hypocritical, privately, they have continued to support Israel in almost all of these endeavors. Is that true or not? So, because some people say, well, look, they're trying to placate Europeans, French, to this, to that. They're trying to maybe placate the left in the U.S. There's all sorts of things going on. But when it actually comes to the reality of the battlefields, they have not shifted at all.
Good insight. There's often a gap between public diplomacy and private support, especially on sensitive issues like Israel. Balancing diplomatic relations while backing allies can be effective, but might also risk public trust if actions don't align with statements. Does this approach create stability, or is it too much of a gamble?
So the reality for me is I have friends who are in various senior positions in Israel. I have cousins in Israel. Right. I have friends I've worked with there. Obviously, Palantir supports Israel closely. And my friends are extremely frustrated with this administration. Like, they are texting me, this is ridiculous. We are being told not to do this. They're turning us around. Like, multiple times they could have taken out the Hezbollah leader earlier, and they were stopped. There's all these things they want to do. So on one hand, yes, there is some support. Obviously, it's still very important for Israel as an ally. On the other hand, I can only speak to what people are telling me on my WhatsApp channels, and they are pissed off at what's going on with this administration. They're furious. If you look at who does Israel want to win, the Israelis clearly think Trump is a better president for them. So it's very funny. One of the attacks on him is that he's Hitler and all these things like that. But like, you ask the Israelis, they really want him to win.
Israeli frustration with the administration's stance is telling. While support remains, there's a clear sense they view Trump as a more reliable ally. Could a shift in U.S. policy make a difference on the ground?
Right. What do you make of that, by the way?
I think you alluded to the same. You almost sounded like he was going to go to where Howard Lutnick went, that you've got a lot of generals came up and were appointed through the Obama administration, and you don't want to call it the deep state, but there are people that say deep state.
You can call it a deep state. Basically, if you want to call something a deep state, what that is to me is it's people who don't like receiving orders from the politically elected people, right? There are a lot of people in the bureaucracy in D.C., in the generals, who are offended by the fact that the politically appointed people want to be in charge and try to build and work around them. And there definitely were people that did that with Trump, and he wouldn't have it. He had his own way. I mean, if you look at the State Department, you look at the DOD, like, their way of doing things in certain areas is just very against what the Trump administration wanted. And so there was a huge clash. And I mean, listen, some of these attacks on Trump, there are people in the room, like my friend Nick Ayers, who worked for Pence. He's been critical of Trump in other places. He came out really strongly defending Trump, saying you would never say that. Patently false, total BS. So you've had these just like crazy attacks. And I think they're attacks of desperation. I think it's very clear Trump has a ton of momentum right now.
This points to a real clash between the political leadership and an entrenched bureaucracy resistant to certain directives, especially under Trump. It's interesting how these deep state tensions have come to symbolize a broader power struggle, with career officials pushing back against policy shifts they don't agree with. Could this ongoing friction explain some of the intense challenges and criticism that arose during Trump's term?
What would you see? Is it called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency?
I love it. Yes.
What would that look like? I mean, the slash and burn at Twitter. How many people left he's doing it with 20% of the workforce?
I mean, Twitter is one thing. The government, I think we all know. And
so he could only go 50% and do just as
well. The government is obviously even more wasteful, of course, in some ways.
So he could do more than 80%.
I'm not saying that's what they would want to do, but I mean, listen, I have a lot of friends, even on the moderate left, who are totally aligned with the Department of Government Efficiency
still
idea.
friends? Right.
And the reason is because basically the left has special interests, the right does too. The left special interest, one of the biggest ones, is the government unions. And so they all know there's like tons of empty buildings in D.C., there's people not working, there's tens of billions of dollars in Medicare, Medicaid fraud, there's tens of billions of dollars wasted on like these crazy unaccountable NGOs. They're giving money to NGOs in the Middle East to stop hate speech and stop misinformation. And it turns out the NGOs are giving money to are doing misinformation against Israel. So I mean, there's just waste everywhere you look. So of course it's a good thing.
The concept of a Department of Government Efficiency is intriguing, especially given how wasteful government operations can be. There's no doubt that drastic measures could streamline operations significantly, maybe even up to 80%. The fact that even moderate left-leaning individuals recognize the inefficiencies like empty offices and rampant fraud in programs like Medicare shows a shared frustration across the aisle. It raises a critical question. How can we effectively cut through that bureaucratic bloat to promote accountability without sacrificing necessary services?